Good morning to you all over there in Canada. Nice to be sharing time with you, considering the Dhamma together. So the subject matter of today's reflection is determination. And determination is one of the 10 parami that the bodhisattvas develop in order to become teaching Buddhas. And this is exemplified in, from what we can see in the enlightenment process when the bodhisattva leaves the palace. When he's looking at his wife and his newborn son, and he's aware that they are subject to aging, illness, and death, just like he is. And he has a resolute determination that he will find the deathless, not just for himself, but for all of those who he cared for, which was, in the case of the bodhisattva, all beings everywhere. And so when he was wandering through Rajgir, Rajagaha, King Bimbisara, it said, saw him as he walked by, and he was so impressed by the countenance, he knew immediately that this was a royal person. And he approached him and said, I'm so impressed by your carriage and demeanor, your presence. Please rule my kingdom with me. I give you half of it. That's how impressed he was by the... you understand that a bodhisattva has been developing enormous merits for hundreds of thousands of eons, then they probably look quite impressive and have an incredible sense of presence. The king recognized that. The bodhisattva said, I see danger in these things. These material things and sensual pleasures are in the realm of death. I'm not interested in these things. I am seeking the deathless. The fact that even the bodhisattva knew that there was a deathless, this one has to, I would deduce that this is because of his past encounters with Buddha's teachings in past lives, many past lives. So he has a very, very strong intuition, strong conviction, because there is the conditioned, because there is that which arises and ceases, there must be an unconditioned. Most people don't have that intuition. And that's why we must rely upon the Buddhas to discover the path and teach it to us. But he did have that intuition, conviction. And the king, being even more impressed, King Bimbisara said, okay, I give you all of my kingdom. And then the bodhisattva said, no, I mean it. I'm really not interested. I'm going to realize deathless. And King Bimbisara then said, good, when you do, come back and teach me. Good man. And this was, he did later after his enlightenment, the Buddha went and established the first monastery, which was offered by that king, King Bimbisara. But in his striving, when he practiced with his first two teachers, he developed he already must have had quite remarkable samadhi, because they don't even mention the first 4 jhanas, but he practiced the 5th and 6th jhana with his first teacher, and then the 7th and 8th jhana with his second teacher. And so, again, just the capacity to apply focus and commitment and discipline, it's quite remarkable. When he saw that these samadhi states were of themselves still bound by death, this is another amazing thing about the bodhisattva as a practitioner. Most beings would be deluded by these states because they're so radiant and boundless and spacious. You know, just look at how they're described: the infinite base of space, the infinite base of consciousness, the infinite base of nothingness, the infinite base of neither perception or non-perception. We're talking about extremely profound and subtle and boundless things. And when the mind is experiencing such things, there isn't a perception of self. the self is suppressed by the samadhi, as are all of the kilesas. The mind's very, very bright. But what the Bodhisattva noticed was that those states degenerate and a more ordinary state comes back again. So most practitioners would just go back into that state again because they're so adept to achieve that level of accomplishment. The practitioner is extremely adept, so they can just go in again and go in again and go in again. And this is how these great practitioners get born as Brahma deities. But the Bodhisattva, with his sharp faculties, saw this is not the deathless, this is not liberation, this is a condition. It's the most profound and subtle and pure of the conditions, but it's still a condition. So that's where we see his extraordinary efforts when he went off to the cave and was practicing austerity, only eating a half a palm of rice a day, and where it's described that his front skin touched his back skin. So the skin of his stomach was touching the skin of his back. And when he got up to defecate occasionally, he would fall over on his face. That's how weak he was. Now, during that time, the Bodhisattva was not allowing his mind to absorb into any samadhi states. He was practicing the extreme of patient endurance with painful, racking feelings to see if that was what would crack the puzzle. Maybe that would open the trapdoor. He says, in describing his practice during that time, that it is possible that another spiritual practitioner suffered as much as he did. But it is not in their striving. But it is not possible that any other spiritual practitioner since time immemorial suffered more. That's quite a remarkable statement. And he did that for 7 years. So there's a sitting practice, sitting with the pain in the body, sitting with hunger, sitting with cold. He wasn't wearing clothing, wasn't wearing blankets, and he wasn't bathing. So imagine all the itching and all that stuff. So anyway, it's good to remember that the Buddha did these things because it's a part of Buddhanussati. It can give rise to feelings of gratitude and love and respect and just thankfulness that such a being would do that, to try to find Nibbana, as he did do. So I think most of us know the origin story, the Buddha's life story. He had the intuition then that it wasn't working. And then he had the memory that he had attained to one of the lower jhanas as a young boy. And he remembered that kind of pleasure was harmless, wholesome. If he was to combine some concentration with directed, focused thought, perhaps that would be the way to liberation. And of course it was. So he went and sat under the Bodhi tree. And once again, one of these incredible statements with regards to determination, he did say, "Let my blood dry up. I am not moving from this post until I realize Nibbana." Fortunately for him and fortunately for us, he did. By directing his mind to recollect all of his previous past lives and seeing the arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing due to conditions always changing, no abiding, unchanging self, penetrating into the insight of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. So for those of us who aren't bodhisattvas aspiring to be teaching Buddhas, fortunately, we don't have to practice to that degree. We are given our instructions, the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths. It is explained to us how to practice to develop insight, develop samadhi, and how to purify and liberate our minds. Even so, nobody says it's easy. And even on the shortest track, one does need to have focused and consistent, disciplined efforts. And if anybody appears to attain enlightenment quickly, as they do in the suttas, it's because they practiced diligently, consistently in the past. This is the only way to make the 5 spiritual powers Remember, that's one of my favorite lists to talk about. Lord Buddha, after his enlightenment, was in awe of what he had accomplished. We have to use the convention he, because he had realized not self. He wasn't identified with the personality, but using conventional speech, he was in awe of Nibbana, and he was wondering, how did I accomplish this? Because it goes against the grain of the world. It is difficult to penetrate. And he had this awareness, direct knowing. It's these 5 spiritual powers, when cultivated, made much of, lead to the deathless and merge in the deathless. I love this list because it's short and simple and it covers everything. And it's such a confidence-inspiring statement. 5 things lead to Nibbana. Okay? You don't need to read the entire Tripitaka, 3 canons. What you do need is faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So those things. This is where we come to the area of determination. Nietzsche mentioned the determination that I had practiced in Bodh Gaya. I recently completed a vow to sit 4,000 hours. It didn't start that grand. And I think if you were to tell me 20 years ago that one day I will have sat 4,000 hours of meditation under the Bodhi tree, I would not believe you. So the thing about determination is, when we make an effort and we consistently, we realize we're capable of making that effort, and then we train ourselves to make a bit more, and then a bit more, in a kind of a plodding, consistently doing a little more, doing a little more, but being determined not to slip back, not to lose ground, then we can accomplish quite remarkable things. So I remember when I was a novice, and Christine knew me as a novice. I can see her on the screen here. Christine knew me as a novice at Wat Anachat. It was about 6 days a week that I wanted to disrobe, actually. And I had made a vow that I would, this is the thing about determination, I had made a vow that I would do it for a year. And this is the thing, it's the thing about, we make determinations in order to stretch our capacity to be determined. So these 2 things. It's like we make a determination. It has a very close relationship to commitment. And then when we make this kind of commitments, that gives us the kind of container where we can commit to a process and then observe from that process and learn from that process. So if I hadn't made that commitment, well, it's 27 years later, I wouldn't be here now. Because when those strong moods came up of, I can't take this anymore, I can't stand this, I want to leave. So understanding 3 a.m. wake-ups in 1 meal a day, walking barefoot for 5 kilometers on an unpaved road, mosquitoes, no mattress, bathing in cold water. And I was coming from Sydney, where I had hot water, where I had a mattress, where I had nice food, where I had a fridge, these things that one has. And I didn't have those there. So why didn't I disrobe? Because there was 1 day a week, on average, where I felt light in body, light in mind, and this lovely quality that they talk about, freedom from remorse. You're just not doing anything wrong. So you don't feel bad about that. It's a very lovely thing when it's like, no, I'm being forced to keep these very high standards in all these areas. I'm not doing anything wrong, not even killing any mosquitoes. It's like, it's the Buddha's rules for bhikkhus are quite stringent and refined, and there are many of them. And of course, being exposed repeatedly to teachings, wisdom teachings, and imbibing the faith of others. Thanatan Jayasaro was describing his faith in Ajahn Chah and his faith in Ajahn Chah's system of training and his faith in the Vinaya and the Bhikkhu training, and listening to his reasoned faith again and again and again. My own faith and my own commitment deepened, so that after that year as a novice, I was Actually, it was 18 months as a novice, so I still had lots of doubts. I spent longer as a novice than my friends did because I wasn't sure about committing to the bhikkhu training. Going from 10 rules to 227 rules is a big leap. So I was an anagarika for 6 months and a novice for 18 months. But I did commit to being and in those days, the training was, I'd been told that you had to make a commitment to trying to be a monk for 5 years for them to take you on at Wat Nanachat. Fortunately for me, nobody asked me, have you made this firm resolve at Tanachalo, Nenachalo at the time? Have you made this firm resolve? Because I could not have answered truthfully that I had. I was thinking to myself, I hope nobody asks. I hope nobody asks. I'm just going to try for a year. And so it's a similar thing. There's a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges. And but after that year and during the rainy season, I was like, oh, I'm definitely disrobing after this. I'm definitely disrobing. And I'm very glad I've spent these year and a half as a novice, 6 months as a bhikkhu. I'm glad I did it, but I'm leaving afterwards. And of course, at the end of the rainy season retreat, I'm like, well, why don't you try one more year? And so at the end of 2 years as a bhikkhu, I determined 3 more years. After 5 years as a bhikkhu, I determined 5 more years. After 10 years as a bhikkhu, I determined 10 more years. So it's like when we make these commitments and we do practices and keep standards for a certain period of time, it dawns on us that we can keep that standard, actually. And it becomes something that we are now capable of. And then once we are now capable of something, it is also possible that we can do a bit more as well, more than we did before. And so similarly with when I did finish 10 years as a bhikkhu, I did notice this. This was a very interesting thing that I observed in my 10th rainy season retreat. There was this kind of petering out of energy and not much. It was quite good circumstances. I was living with my teacher, but there wasn't much energy for practice and I wasn't getting very good results. And then the last day of the rainy season retreat came and then this question came up. So are you disrobing? Or are you going to continue practicing? And I'd actually forgotten that I'd made the determination at the end of my 5th year that I would practice for 5 more years as a monk. So there was this expiry date coming up, and there wasn't a further commitment, and the result of that was that there just wasn't much energy. There was enough energy to get through it, but not much energy to continue. So I was like, of course I'm going to continue. I was like, and I noticed this burst of energy come on the last day of the rainy season retreat. And I was like, oh, I wish I'd remembered this determination at the beginning of the retreat. I could have I would have got more energy. So I saw very clearly in my own mind and my own practice that being determined to continue, being determined to practice affects our energy level. So energy for practice. It's very, very closely related to how committed we are to doing it. Then I decided to go to Bodh Gaya. I was fortunate I had some people who were willing to support me to go there. Of course, Bodh Gaya is a 3-hour flight from Bangkok. And there are direct flights these days, so it's quite convenient, much more convenient than before. And so I wanted to go and make that. It's almost like ordaining again, deepening the commitment, making the commitment. I went to the Bodhi tree to make the commitment to do 10 more years as a bhikkhu. And then I started sitting. I wanted to do 6 hours a day of sitting, and I was doing some Tibetan bows. I decided to do 7,000 full-length Tibetan prostrations. My practice is a bit eclectic. Those of you who have listened to some of my previous teachings may have noticed this. But so I was doing this, but I couldn't sit more than 6 hours because there's this kind of noisy, dusty, dirty place with kind of a lot of unpredictability, different groups coming around the corner making different noises, and some of the chanting you like and some of it you don't. And some of the groups behave very well, but some of them behave very poorly. And it's just kind of sitting in this exposed environment to all of this impingement. And it was about 6 hours was all I could manage when I just couldn't stand it anymore. And I had to get back to a room with concrete walls around me, a bit of sensory protection. But similarly to, the 1 day a week when I was happy to be a novice, the experience in Bodh Gaya is that when the mind was peaceful, it was more peaceful than normal. So it's like considerably more peaceful than normal. So that, as bhikkhus, very interested in peaceful mind states and learning how to bring them about and stabilize them, etc. So coming back to Thailand, you think you get, after a month or 6 weeks in Bodh Gaya, you kind of feel like you've had enough. But you come back to Thailand and it's like, well, you miss it because it's like you've touched something more refined, more subtle, more beautiful, more, it's like in Bodh Gaya for myself, when I'm practicing there, it's almost like you can smell or touch or taste, almost taste nibbana. It's like some kind of vibration of Buddha's enlightenment is in that place, if the mind is sensitive enough to intuit it. So I went back again and again when conditions allowed. And then I realized, I think I was 2 years into this monastery building project. And I realized that I think I had about 140 hours to do before I would complete 1,000 hours of meditation under the Bodhi tree. And I had to send an email to Ajahn Pavro. We've been on a pilgrimage together. Ajahn Pavro, Canadian monk, many of you will know him, was back in the monastery, but he didn't speak Thai very well. And I was kind of thinking to myself, I'd been struggling a bit as a new abbot, becoming an abbot, building a monastery, founding a monastery is not an easy thing. And I was thinking, if I could complete this 1,000 hours, this would be good for my confidence. I would feel very happy to have done this, and it would be a good thing to do. And I also wouldn't mind not having to return to my monastery for 2 more weeks. Give me a break. And so I wrote an email to Ajahn Pabro. He said, sure, nothing much happening here. Go for it. And so when I completed this 1,000 hours in a moment of, some people might consider it madness, I know, spiritual fervor, I determined, okay, I'm going to do 2,000 more hours of meditation under the Bodhi tree, 1,000 for the Buddha, 1,000 for the Dhamma, 1,000 for the Sangha. And that necessitated, for a good number of years, 2 trips to Bodh Gaya a year, doing about 400 hours per session. So I ended up working up to being able to sit 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, 10 hours a day. And I didn't really put a timeline on it, but if you make a vow in Bodh Gaya, it presses on the mind, and there's this sense of you want to complete it. You don't want it uncompleted. And and similarly, sitting for 10 hours a day became something that I could do. And simply by keeping on trying and not pulling back. So from the 6 hours, even when there was irritation, just sitting an extra 2 hours, I said, okay, I kind of made this deal with myself. If I'm going to take money from the lay people for tickets, accommodation, and food, I better not be being lazy. I really have to be worth these offerings. I better be increasing my efforts. So I would increase for an hour and eat from 6 to 7, next time from 7 to 8, next time from 8 till 9 a day, 9 till 10. And it's not really sustainable to do more than 10. So once I got to 10, I was like, okay, that is enough. That's enough. That's a good effort. It's not easy to do that. And it was in the forcing myself to do more that I learned how to deal with the irritation and how to practice with the irritation. But sometimes you have to set yourself up to be in that uncomfortable space so that you find a way to deal with it, way to work with it. And what I found very helpful was cultivating more metta. At the times when I'm suffering, I'm one of the sentient beings who has suffering, I have to spread metta to myself. Then once using that metta to just wash out the irritation, annoyance, frustration in the heart. And once you've done that, of course, you can radiate metta to the other people under the Bodhi tree, and then your teachers, your parents, your relatives, your friends, all beings. And the other thing that was very helpful was the mudita practice, like focusing on the fact that these various groups had come from different countries, and whether you liked their behavior or their sound or their speakers or whatever, focusing on their intention and rejoicing. I learned how to gladden the heart, brighten the mind in a situation where I had previously been irritated. So it's possible, but These are stretching our capacities. In my experience, 27 years now as a bhikkhu, comes from forcing ourselves to do a bit more than we think we can. And until that becomes something that we know we can do. And so in terms of your practice now, I don't know how much you sit each day. If you sit for half an hour a day, you might want to consider increasing to 45 minutes. If you sit for 45 minutes, you might want to increase to an hour. One doesn't just put in the time for the sake of ticking off numbers. One is training in bringing extra clarity and presence of mind to the mind, training in the 4 foundations of mindfulness and clear comprehension. And in my experience, if you sit for longer sessions, you will tend to have more insights into the nature of the mind. And you'll give your mind more of a chance to collect for periods of time. Sometimes it takes 20 minutes to become peaceful. And if you're only sitting for half an hour, you only get 10 minutes of peacefulness. If you're sitting for an hour and the mind becomes peaceful after 20 minutes, it might stay peaceful for half an hour, come out, you've still got 10 or 15 minutes left, you can do some interesting reflection, you can deepen your wisdom with focused thought. If you're already doing 1 session a day, it might be time to commit to 2 sessions a day. And if a lot of people come to me and they say, I don't really feel that I'm getting ahead in my practice very much. And then I will ask them, so how much are you practicing? And often they say a half an hour a day. And then I invariably have to say to them, you are practicing, what you're doing is correct, but you're not yet doing enough. If you want to increase the strength of your sati, increase your samadhi, deepen your insights, you need to do more than this. It could be in the area of chanting. There might be a chant that you've been doing for years. You always look at the book. You can make a commitment to memorizing it, because mindfulness in Thailand is often translated as right recollection. This capacity to remember is very closely linked to the capacity to be mindful of the breath, recollect the feelings of the footsteps. So there might be some chants that you could make a commitment to learning by heart. Or if you don't have a very good memory, you don't want to commit to learning the chants, but you can do an extra chant. There might be, you chant the Dhamma once a week, the first sermon, or you might alternate the first sermon one day, and the Sutra on Not Self another day, the fire sermon another day, or Paritas another day. So chanting is a very good practice to do before meditation, because it begins to gather the mind. When you do a vigorous session of chanting for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, you can't really think much about what you are doing during the day, and you can't really think much about what you need to do next week. It's already putting you within parameters where you're coming more into the body, more into the present. And then it's easier to go from that state to peaceful meditation. So chanting is a wonderful thing to do before meditation. It might be precepts. There might be some of the precepts you're not perfectly strict with. You might want to just make some determinations. Okay, for this 1 month, I am going to be really strict. And then you can see what is the effect of that. And when we make these commitments and we do it for a period of time, that's what I was explaining. I was a novice for 18 months, and I just had to acknowledge that my mind was getting brighter, that there was less negative qualities and less unskillful behavior. And I had to acknowledge that even though it might not be working as fast as I would like it to, but it is working. And a natural feeling of gratitude to the Buddha, and also recognition of good fortune. I kept meeting all of these people who wanted to be monks that had various things obstructing them, and an unwell parent that they had to take care of, a sibling whose education they were helping to pay for, or various things, a debt that they had to pay. And I was there, and it was like, my parents were healthy, I had no debt, and so I didn't really have an excuse. I had to, it was best to stick to it. And yes, but when we stick to things and in a focused, disciplined way, we see the benefits for ourselves. So I offer those words for your encouragement. I'd like to give people the opportunity to ask questions if they have any.
Maybe I'll kick things off, Rajan, with a question, and hopefully someone else probably wants to jump in. Rajan, there's often a time in your practice when you slip, right? It happens to everybody. It's so common. In that moments, what would be the most effective way to get back up and into the line?
I think for lay people, one of the most effective things is to sign up to a retreat. So when you get back into the communal kind of, you have a group of people committing to something, you have the noble silence, you have these supports, which, and it's like a refresh and recharging. So even if it's a weekend retreat or a day long, if you really have slipped, get to a situation where there's some support. And because unfortunately, it's fortunate and unfortunate. The good news about mindfulness is that if we are able to cultivate it continuously, consistently, it gets stronger and stronger and more powerful, and it's an incredibly purifying, transformative quality. That's the good news. The unfortunate thing about it is that it degenerates much faster than it becomes cultivated. So unfortunately, so it's much, much easier to damage your mindfulness and feel like you have to start all over again than it is to make it powerful and consistent and strong. So the kilesas get thicker when our mindfulness is weak, and when we don't meditate much, and the hindrances get thicker. So sometimes we come back to our pillow, our sitting cushion, and it's just kind of like, oh God, it's like we're not wanting to be with it. It's unpleasant, it's coarse, it's painful. So if you can go and see one of your teachers who you love and respect, and go to a community that you appreciate, see some of your spiritual friends. There's a whole bunch of other pleasant phenomena in there that will help you be with the unpleasantness of the unpurified mind. So, and it does happen to all of us, and even senior monks and abbots, we get busy with projects. Sometimes we don't really have a choice. You have to get a certain project over a finish line because you've made a commitment to it. The lay people have supported it. It's part of your duty. You have to do it. And then oftentimes we will have some kind of, that's the periods of India were very helpful to me because I was burdened with all of these duties of learning how to be a building project manager and a reforestation project manager and a social worker and a, scholarships program and all of the other stuff you do apart from being a monk. And going to India was a great way to just put that down and be able to just meditate. So going twice a year was very, very helpful. In the monastery has less work now because it's mostly built now, and the forest is growing. But there are periods in our lives where we have to put our shoulder to the grindstone and work really hard to get things done. And there's periods in our lives where there's dramas in our life or in the lives of those around us where we have to be kind of energetically available for them, and it eats into our time and has an effect on our minds. So yeah, we all need to take these periods of retreat if we can. If you can't sign up to a retreat, there are, like Tanajana Nun, you can join the evening chanting at Wat Map Jana. I'm not sure what time that is in Canada, but there are people doing things online now where you can, that the chanting is happening at that time on Zoom. You can join it, hear other practitioners. You can hear that translated Dhamma talk. So there are these other ways to tap into a sense of community. So.
Thank you, Tanajan, for your talk today. It's really on point. I'm thinking about determination a lot. Wanted to ask you about maintaining mindfulness, even when sometimes meditation is tough. Even with the daily practice, dedicated times to meditate twice a day, there's fluctuations in terms of what we manage. Certainly in my practice, what I managed to accomplish. Sometimes it's, over what I'd set out to sit for, sometimes it's under. It's about those times where, you don't accomplish what you set out to do. It can really mess with your mindfulness because you get so frustrated at yourself. And I wonder if you could talk to us about, not allowing that frustration to set us further back. Maybe things that we can do to stay mindful despite. Thank you.
Yes, this is it's an inevitable part of practice that when we're aspiring for higher standards and we don't meet that standard, and it's appropriate to feel, it's described as hiriyanotapa, conscience. We need to have a sense of conscience about it. And so there is conscience and shame, but it's wholesome shame. This is tricky. I mean, this whole area of shame, hiriyanotapa, is not adding ill will to it, not adding self-aversion. So it's not self-flagellation. It's a wholesome quality. And but most people will add some anger and irritation on top of it and aim it inwards, which when you're looking at whichever way you look at this, the five spiritual powers, the five hindrances, the second hindrances is anger and irritation, ill will, hatred. So if we're picking up the second hindrance and aiming it at ourselves, that is not going to be increasing our chances of experiencing radiant mind states or developing insight. So it's like you need to feel a little bit bad about it because you didn't fulfill your aspiration. But the best thing to do is to just do it. So if you can just pull your socks up again as quickly as possible. So suppose you missed your session yesterday, you do an extra session today. And then it's like, it's done. It's like, okay, I made up for it. But I think one thing Lompo Biek says is, suppose you just haven't done your session of meditation and it's bedtime already, and if you try to sit now, you're going to be tired. Lompo Biek says, one of my teachers, a great disciple of Lompo Cha, he says, just do it anyway, even if you're sitting there slumped over, dribbling, because it's establishing the habit, and you can put your head on the pillow afterwards knowing that you made the effort. It's like, so sometimes we have such high standards, I'm only going to sit if I can sit and look like a Buddha statue. And it's like, and he's not saying to do that. He's saying, even if you're falling asleep in the sitting posture, do it, because it's establishing the habit. And then obviously, once you have the habit, there are going to be times when you come to sit and the mind's bright and the body's upright, and you've just established this habit where you don't miss it. And I think that is what we need to do. So, but if we really slip, there are things we can do. In the Mahayana tradition, there are these purifications and these kind of repentance. They kind of do repentance retreats and purifications. So we can make some kind of a gesture of making up for it. So suppose you've slipped, you didn't keep some of your commitments. So it's okay. Okay, well, I'm going to chant the Dhammacakka Sutta every day for this week. It's like you can do something which kind of gives you back your dignity. And it's like you made a gesture of compensation and you made up for it. You made some good gestures to make up for it. So that can be helpful, doing a bit of extra practice. And but we don't do it as a punishment. So repentance has this another idea. Repentance is associated with being forgiven. So in that Christian context, you repent and then you are forgiven. So a repentance practice is making a gesture of acknowledging fault or having slipped from the standard, and then you forgive yourself, and you understand that the Buddha forgives you as well. Like, the Buddha isn't in the sky holding grudges and judging you. So the Buddha just wants you to succeed and bless you to succeed. So, but it is important to recognize that guilt, this is a thing, people in Western cultures have more of this than people in Thailand and Southeast Asia in general, I think, that guilt isn't wholesome. It's not a wholesome mind state. And I think a lot of Westerners may have an assumption that it is a wholesome mind state. I did something wrong, I should feel bad. I did something wrong, I should withhold loving kindness from myself. I should hate myself. I should punish myself. And it's like, no, anger and ill will and self-aversion is always unwholesome. And conscience, awareness of negative karmic consequences, that's wholesome. But we don't dwell in it for too long. We have those moments where we feel the conscience and the moments where you feel a bit of shame, and then you get on with it, so that you don't have to keep feeling that. You don't dwell in that state. The metta practice is very important because we need to be able to hold the loving kindness in this heart and chest area for periods of time. And when we feel these negative energies oppressing the heart, we need to replace that with metta. So we need to become adept at metta so that we can move that energy, shift that energy. Don't let that energy hang around for too long.
If you don't mind, I have a follow-up comment to what you just said.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I've noticed I've been tuning into some more teachers from Thailand, and it really does seem that there's a cultural difference in the East and West vis-a-vis the pervasiveness of guilt and shame.
Right.
And I have found that the Buddhist tenets have been really helpful in sort of deprogramming some of the stuff, even if we're not, we weren't raised Catholic or Baptist as I was. It's in the air. Mm-hmm.
No, it is. In Judeo-Christian culture, if a person knows how to practice Christianity, taking the example of Christ as a meditation, in Buddhism we would call that deva nusati, like recollecting these beautiful qualities and focusing on that, then it can be a powerful spiritual tool. But the idea that someone had to die for your original sin, that, I remember coming home from one of the few Christian classes that I went to as a little boy. I said to my dad went to an Anglican private school, and I said to my dad, if God created everything, why is Jesus his only son? I mean, aren't I his son too? I'm like, and my dad wasn't very patient with Christianity. He said, excuse my Australian, he said, it's all just bullshit, mate. You don't need that in your life. And he wrote a letter that forbid me from attending religious class after that, because they were only teaching Christianity. So I'm sure it could have been taught. And another question I asked my dad, I said, if God is good and if God created everything, why is there so much suffering in the world? And if surely God could fix it if he had the power to. I think it was about 8 or 9 when I was asking these questions, and my dad said, yeah, mate, you don't need this in your life. So I was in the library with the one Muslim girl and the Jehovah's Witness, and I was reading Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That was my spiritual education as a young boy. But my parents said, if you want a religion, you can choose one yourself when you're an adult. But they literally forbade us from going to church for 18 years. So I didn't get too much of the Christian guilt, but other than what my mother gave me in transmission, because she did have a Catholic childhood. But like I said, there are ways to relate to the skillful means in that religion skillfully, if it's taught skillfully. But that idea that someone had to die because something was wrong with you is a powerful suggestion, which is very different to the Buddhist teaching that there's something inherently pure in you which is obscured temporarily. It's a very, very different, and that the Buddha, who we all bow to, is an example of your potential. It's not this thing in the sky that's judging you. It's like you can become the object of refuge that you love and respect. You can become that, because it's incredibly affirming and positive, and it does affect people differently. Thai people are very sensual, and they probably could have a bit more guilt and shame, to be honest. It's a middle way.
Thank you so much, Tanajan. Really appreciate that.
Rajan, there's a question in the chat box. During meditation, it is difficult for me to control my brain. What should I do to control my thoughts?
Right. So there are, for people who think a lot, I don't think we need to think in terms of control. It's more like what we give interest to. So it's an attitude shift. So we try to be aware of it as a thought, but we try not to grasp it, and we try not to think the next thought. But we might have to do that hundreds of times, and there's another thought and there's another thought. But in the process of meditation, it is different, because you're not attending to the thought, grasping the thought, and thinking the next thought. You're just knowing thought is a thought and giving the interest to the feeling of the breathing. But there are things that people can do. I said earlier, if a person has the time, it's very skillful to do an energetic session of chanting before the meditation, because it's using thinking energy. But it's the thoughts are focused on the mind that would normally be thinking is focused on the words of the chant, and for that period of time. So it's already kind of gently suppressing or inclining the mind away from proliferation and bringing it within parameters. But there are other things that you can do. So Tanajan, one of the methods that Ajahn teaches is counting the breath. So you count from 1 in breath, 1 out breath, to you count up to 5, and then you count backwards. 5, 5, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. And what you'll notice is that if you think a thought and you really think it, you get lost in it, you won't know what number you're up to. And then you have to start again. So it's a very helpful way of knowing, oh, I've lost my meditation object. I don't know where I am. So you will tend not to get lost in the thinking for too long. And you come back again, 1, 1, 2, 2. The mind can become very peaceful with counting the breath. People sometimes don't like to do it because it seems too rudimentary or too kind of basic. But if it works in keeping the mind present in the present moment and on the breath, then there will be more feelings of tranquility and rapture and serenity. And then we can always, when the mind begins to collect or be a bit more settled, content to meditate, we can change the noting to be Buddho, which is more spiritual a feel to it. So yeah, counting can be very helpful. Another thing which is helpful is a session of walking meditation can also be helpful before the sitting, because it's just that grounding, feeling the bottom of the feet, Buddho, 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 or rising and falling, rising and placing, whatever method of noting people use, half an hour of walking before coming to sit. So various things that we do to pacify the thinking mind. And of course, another thing we need to do is look at how we're using our mind during the day, which sometimes we don't have a choice. People have busy jobs and they have to use a lot of thought. Then when they come to sit, there's going to be a lot of thinking. But in terms of what type of media we consume, how much news we watch, how much we comment on news, it may be possible that we are stimulating more thinking than we need to, and expressing more opinions and views than we need to. And so sometimes we can look at how are we using the mind throughout the day. Is there ways to think less? It's like, if you're going to spend 3 hours looking at the news, would it be better to go out and make a rose garden? It's like, if you have that kind of spare time, it's like, well, can you go on a trek? Can you go on a hike? can you take the dog for a walk? Is there something you can do that will just put you more in your body and be less of an abstract? And if you are taking the dog for a walk, you don't need to be listening to music or listening to the news while you do it. You just take out the headphones, leave the device at home, really take the dog for a walk. I recommend people meditate in the morning, and I recommend that not looking at your device before you do it. Just kind of give yourself some separation from these mobile devices. So make that your time before you start allowing the world to come crashing into your life. That you establish awareness of your breathing. You take that time for yourself. You have quiet time where you're emptying the mind. Establishing some mindfulness so that when you do start to engage with these things, you engage them with more mindfulness. So they are addictive, and we do need to set parameters with them so that we are using them and they are not using us. And it's a challenge for all of us. So